Welcome to MATCHplay, where every episode starts with a spark and ends with insight that can only come from personal experience at the highest level. Let's tee up some good conversation. I'm Thad Miller, and welcome back to MATCHplay. Today's conversation is about entrepreneurship, long-term thinking, and what it really takes to build a business that creates value over time. Not just grow it, but to eventually position it for a successful sale. Our guest is my good friend, Tim. Thanks for being here, Tim Wiley. He grew a successful medical device company and sold it at its peak. Currently, he works with CEOs and leadership teams in mid-market companies. He has a front row seat to what separates businesses that scale and endure from those that stall or struggle when it comes to time to exit. This is a story about building with intention, thinking beyond today's wins, and understanding what truly matters when you're planning for a future of your company. So, first thing, every episode of MATCHplay starts with a spark, a literal match strike. When the flame burns, I'll ask you a series of rapid fire questions, Tim. Get ready. And go ahead. When the flame goes out, we'll dive into the conversation. Here we go. All right, here we go. Favorite book?
I would have said Good to Great by Jim Collins, but I'm going to go with Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
All right. I love Simon Sinek. College football or hoops? It's a conflict for us IU fans.
It is a big conflict right now, but I'm still going to go college hoops. That's been mostly a basketball guy, but I'm thrilled the Hoosiers are national champs.
It is, and we got the trophy back here to prove it.
That's right.
First job when you were a kid?
My first job was a lawn business that I started myself in my neighborhood, which led to doing 26 yards in the neighborhood. When I started at 11, and probably by 13 I was doing that many. I actually hired a neighbor kid to help me.
You're the wealthiest 13-year-old in the county.
I was motivated and did pretty well.
You were flush.
Did pretty
well.
well.
You could buy Atari games and candy and whatever you wanted.
Yep.
I love it. Obviously, entrepreneur. Thanks for joining us. Give us a little background of your medical device company, how that came about, and what that looked like.
So I was mostly a salesman. First job out of college was not medical, but I was a biology major, so I knew I wanted to get that direction. Interviewed, finally got into the medical side, worked at two different jobs, C.R. Bard and a company called Sterile Design that J&J ended up buying. But those were good starters. And the second one, there was a straight commission job.
Yeah.
That not only was it straight commission, but the commission was tied to the margin on the business. So I learned a lot about how that all works.
Oh, yeah. I had to learn
and then access to working in hospitals. I worked in the cath lab, and in the operating room, I found the operating room a lot more fun. And I also realized that orthopedics was a really fun part. Probably the two best gigs in that world at the time were either heart or cardiac or ortho. Ortho was more fun. It's not life and death. It's maybe people I related to easier. So I was pretty driven to get into that.
People get in there, their shoulders bother them a little bit. They're worried about their golf game.
Exactly.
A lot of that treatment's done in the fall.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, you want to heal and be ready for spring.
Exactly. But I was driven to get into that ortho, used some connections to get there, and then really I was in that business for 25 years. So.
Right. And at one point, how did you invest and start your own?
So kind of fell in my lap. I worked for another independent distributor. A lot of that world at that time, it's even a mix today. These companies, the big manufacturers, they go direct, they go independent, they go, and that cycle's gone on for years, decades. Anyway, at the time, I was working for an independent distributor, but Zimmer was the main player there, and they were a multi-billion-dollar company even then. And they kind of controlled that brokerage. So they would basically buy one guy out, next guy buys in. I got that opportunity. I'd already been there quite a few years. So I was a sales manager, VP of sales. It was kind of a natural opportunity, but pretty big investment. I think it was like $1.6 million.
Right.
And at the time, about 60 people, 3 offices. But the other thing about that business, you're in a set geography. We had 92 counties. They weren't all in Indiana, but 92 counties.
And you had 60 people working for you
at that time.
Majority salespeople.
Yes. And when I sold it November of 2015, had 92, and about 60 of them were salespeople.
Wow.
There's a lot of logistics in the orthopedic world, lots of parts and pieces and instruments. And that's why the logistics are a big part of, you're not just selling stuff, you got to service a lot of activity.
You got to be there. Yeah. When, especially in a trauma case or whatever, you've got to have everything there, or they're going to go with someone else pretty quickly.
Correct.
That person needs to get worked on. That's fascinating. So obviously, you said earlier you had a lawn business. You're a born entrepreneur, it sounds like. What drew you to entrepreneurship, owning your own business?
I don't know if, I was always far rather work for myself, control that. And I worked for, like when I worked for Sterile Design, that was a small, nimble company. J&J buys them. And immediately the rules, just everything about everything was different. And it was just a cultural clash.
Right.
And the more I watched, I thought, that's just not for me. I'm sure I could go in and climb a ladder and all that stuff, but the way they don't think outside the box, it's just one way or the highway.
Right.
There's, as a rep, you have no control of anything. And think about it, at Sterile Design, I not only had control of where I went, what I did, but I also controlled the margin on the business.
You could price it however you
I
like.
could go in cheap and then work my way, but I still only got paid according to the margin on the business.
Right.
So it's a great learning experience, but it's also a learning experience in that transition. And I didn't.
You had no control.
I didn't stay too long, and I went back to a straight commission job, because if you believe in yourself in sales, that's where you want to be. But you got to have the ability to do your job.
Yeah.
So if you have too many rules and regs, it's tough.
Rules and regs, and you have to have a good brand too. I mean,
Right.
if you don't have a good product, it doesn't matter how good you can communicate. You've got to do that. So when you were in this, you saw the other side. As you said, it went in and out of ownership to direct to owned by the manufacturer. When did you feel like you had to time this because you felt like that was coming, or
No,
when you sold, did you sell to another independent and they stayed independent?
No. So the sale was actually triggered by a merger of two of those big companies. And that was both good news and bad news. They were going to have to select and choose and minimize the number of people.
So Zimmer merged with
Biomet, and they're together today. And it was a very interesting merger in terms of leadership-wise, who fell into place. But secondary to that, it was an interesting thing because our contract was about 80 pages long, number one. But number two, my whole retirement of that deal was the post 3 years after you leave. And the reason was they wanted you investing all the way to the end point and not taking money off the table your last couple of years before you retire, that type of thing, which I agree with. However, it was literally written, it was specific to Zimmer products. Well, they just merged two companies that have a lot of the exact same stuff.
Right.
In fact, it was an antitrust stuff for a while because it was
just overlapping.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, it overlapped almost completely. However, the opportunity there was, okay, rather than me living off the next 3 years of what someone else can do, I'm going to negotiate a finite number. And I'm going to take, I propose, here's our last 3 years. Here's what we project for the next few years. There's an exact number. I don't care what they do. I can't control. You could switch that business between the manufacturers. You could do a lot of things that I can't control. They kind of knew that. But I was one of the early people to negotiate my way out of that. But I knew exactly to the penny what I was getting for the next 3 years when I left.
Right.
And that was a good situation.
Right. And when I get into situations and we are selling businesses to entities that are tying what they get to short-term gains or without any control,
right,
it's those details that matter so much.
Absolutely.
Because after you sign it, it's over.
Right.
You have to live with it, and
Right.
there's nothing you can do. And having representation to whomever it is to make sure you know what you're signing is so critical.
Yeah. The other thing, there's a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Oh, yeah.
He's a
negotiator.
FBI negotiator. Right. And I read that book during that time frame to make sure I knew what I was dealing with, and I couldn't agree with him more. But the other thing that when you're negotiating, and first of all, everything's negotiable, and so when a big time company says here's the deal, I don't care what everything's always negotiable. Yeah. And the other thing that was important to me was, all these people, I was in their backyard. So they're up in northern Indiana. I got an office up there. I got one in Indiana. I got one in Cincinnati.
It's Warsaw.
Right. Yeah. So I got people in their backyard that are going to struggle to find a position because they weren't where they were realigning. They probably weren't going to keep an office in Warsaw.
Right.
Because they were aligning the territories differently. But I had some people there that I wanted taken care of. One I remember specifically was a 63-year-old female. She lived in a small town up there. Her daughter and granddaughter were living with her for complicated reasons. And I was like, she's got 18 months.
Right.
You got to get her to retirement. And she was making a lot more than they were going to be able to pay her. And I'm looking at their HR guy going, right, look at the scale of this whole deal. And you're doing this across the country. You're doing God knows how many millions of dollars.
Looking out for your people was a critical part of
this
deal.
And I wanted everybody to have a place and was able to get that done. In her case in particular, hilariously to me, she not only got taken care of for that, but they gave her tenure with us with them. So she got 16 years.
But if you would have never asked,
correct,
if you were just thinking about yourself,
correct,
then And I think that's another key point of people that are listening. If they're thinking they have 2 more years or 5 more years, you were able to do that because you were doing well at the time.
Right.
If you think you can only give 2 years, but you want to work for 5 years, you're not going to be able to negotiate many terms.
Correct.
If you slow down.
Correct.
If you decide not to push it. So that's, when you're measuring how much longer can I do this, I think the question should be how much longer can I do this at the level that I'm doing or higher. Right. And that's not easy. When you get older, when things start falling apart, you get frustrated. You don't want to deal with it.
Right.
Your friends are retiring. They're moving to South Carolina or Florida. It hits home. So, okay, I'm going to pivot a little bit from your business to now you're working with CEOs. What patterns separate businesses that scale with those that plateau?
That's a great question. To me, it's fairly simple. I work in mid-market, and that requires definition. But I would say most of my clients are, $4 to $50 million companies, revenue number. A couple way out above that, but that's for the most part the wheelhouse. And most of those companies, there's natural valleys on growth companies. Like, it's a crazy number, but I think for every startup that starts, only 4% of them make it to $1 million.
Yeah.
0.4% make it to 10.
Yeah.
And so there's natural, and part of that is the natural valleys are if you start a company, as soon as you get to like 10 people, you can't run everything. So you got to start turning over and developing other people. And it happens again at about 25 people. I need a couple of managers.
Right.
And who are those people? And do they have any training whatsoever for what they're going to do?
Right.
And so there's just natural valleys for companies as they grow, which is why they need some help. It's why there's a market for what I do. But to answer the question specifically, it's growing with. So as the leader, it's turning things over to other people.
Correct.
It's getting training for those people. It's getting the right people on the bus in the right seats. And maybe one of the more common ones is I've got an employee that was great, that was a good friend, that I got into this business 10 years ago. And the business is kind of passing by, but they were there for me now. And here I got them there. And, it still goes back to if you're running a business, you have to have the people in the right seats doing the right things that they are good at.
Mm-hmm.
And when that doesn't fit, you've got decisions to make. And we all struggle with the people side of the business.
Yes.
And until you get some experience with that, it's a real struggle.
Yeah.
So, if you've never terminated anybody, it's much more difficult than when you got experience with that. And it takes a while to realize that's not the end of the world for everybody involved.
Well, it's personal. It's not unlike the lady that was, you thought was going to hit the buzzsaw, and you knew her as she was. They just knew her as a number.
Correct. Exactly.
And if it's that person who's dragging you down, you have to take some serious conversations for sure. So what are some that's obviously a common mistake founders make. They hold on to people longer than they should.
And they stay in the same role longer than they should.
So you could even pivot their role and maybe they could grow or
they're going to sit right there. I mean, in many of them, they're the rainmaker.
Uh-huh.
They've got the connections.
They're intimidated.
They're bringing in the business. They're the rainmaker, and they think that, they're very fearful of not being in that role.
Yeah.
But think about it on the flip side. If I'm buying your company and you're the total rainmaker and there's no one else here that does any of that, and I buy this entity, what am I getting?
Right.
Particularly if you're retiring or moving on to something else.
Key man risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do leadership structure and company culture influence a future sale more than founders expect? Like culture, we had a speaker that's somewhat of a colleague of yours.
Yes.
Talked about culture a lot, but like leadership and culture.
I would start with, just organizationally, the first two things that we tackle if we sit down with a client is, what is your org structure? And just tell me about the start. Don't tell me who the people are. And then you start going, okay, then what do they all do? And you kind of create this little chart, and all of a sudden you got Thad has 3 roles, right?
Right.
There's only 7 or 8. But Thad's got 3 of them, and he's not the founder. He's just your right-hand person.
Right.
And you're expected to grow how much, and you want to get to here in 3 years. What's the plan to get Thad doing what he does best, and where does he really fit, and how are we going to get that role filled? When does it happen? So organizational structure is huge. Getting the right people in the right seats, doing what they do well. The other thing I work on with leaders in particular is love and loathe exercise. What do you love doing? What do you loathe doing? We're never going to get rid of everything you loathe, but it shouldn't be 40% of what you're doing.
Right.
Or no one's happy, including you. So there's exercises of it. So it's more than just the right people. It's the right people doing what they do well, what they like doing. They have energy for it. That's the trick to building the team. And I'd say the other element there is just small companies don't really have a leadership team. But the first thing I did, I want to meet with your leadership team. Who is that? Well, we got 14 employees, but 7 of them need to be there. I'm like, really? And that's common. Yeah. It's like, all right, so what is their role? What are they really doing? Do they even have people working for them? There's only 14 of you. How is that possible?
Right.
So it's identifying who is going to run.
And you're going to get that in these smaller companies.
Exactly.
Not unlike my clients,
but you have to develop that and know who that is and build that over time. So I think, depending on the size of the company, the other thing they run into is they're not developing people for those roles. They just assume they're going to step into them.
Right.
With no tools.
Right.
If you've never had somebody working for you, now I give you 3, and you have no training, you have no understanding of how to, yes, you know them, you've worked with them. That's almost worse. We've been peers, and now you got the job, the other 3 didn't, and I want you to run, take care of those people.
And they don't know what they're doing.
There is a challenge there. And then getting back to the culture question, culture is a really difficult, everybody wants one. Everybody thinks they have one. I heard Craig talking about the biggest thing we talk about is whatever your core values are. First of all, how well are they defined? Does everybody here know them? Easy one to figure out.
Right.
Second part, though, is they have to be alive. The only way to have a core value alive is to actually live it. And you should be celebrating core value achievements. Mm-hmm. It should be easy to make hiring, firing decisions based upon them.
Yes.
And the toughest one everybody deals with is a cancerous member of the team who's good at what they do.
Yeah.
Hardest one to get rid of. But you ultimately have to decide what's the cancer worth versus this whole team and the culture that we want to have here versus their performance.
Oh, anybody that's owned a business has had that.
They've all had it. I've done it. I've had a room of 100 people. Yeah. Raise your hand first time you got rid of somebody too soon.
Yeah.
No one ever raises their hand. Ever. No one ever does it too soon. Ever.
That's so good. All right. So you obviously are working with these companies, and they're, like you said, they're middle market, 4 million to 50 million. What should founders when should they realistically start thinking about an exit, even if it's very far away?
Great question. My answer to that would be at least annually, because what are you trying to do? You're trying to build value for this company, right? No matter what your end point is, if you plan on keeping it as a family business for 4 generations, first of all, you don't know that's ever going to be the case. You don't know what your real exit's going to be or why. And we all know timing is everything. So you always want to be ready in case you have to, you need to, you just want to, or your health flips and something. There's so many things you can't predict. If you're not ever thinking about it, you're just not ready. And I'm sure there's a million examples of that. But the flip side is running a business really shouldn't be any different. There's very little you would do differently because I'm planning on selling in 24 months versus 24 years. And people always think there is, I'm going to run. No, you should be making the same. If you want to make the business as good, as strong, as profitable as it can be, nothing changes. One difference, though, would be if you are thinking about selling, and I heard this on one of your other podcasts, very true, your books have got to be in order and ready, because when you go through due diligence, you get hung up there, you're going to lose opportunity, time, and energy on something that doesn't go through, because you'll waste 3 to 6 months with your whole leadership team trying to do all that, and then
and they'll lose confidence,
and everybody loses confidence, including you.
Will it ever sell?
Where
they don't want it
exactly.
Right.
So that bookkeeping's a big one, and it was never my strength. But you got awareness. Going back to founders and their problems, self-awareness is a huge thing. It's one thing coaches all work on. We all should, and so should all of our people. Self-awareness. You have to have that before all the other stuff. Most of us have done psychographic testing, whether it was Brigg-Myers in high school, DISC profiles, Working Genius is the new one that Lencioni's done. There's a bunch of them, but it's all about understanding each other. But you got to understand yourself first, and then understand you, and then how do we work together?
Yeah.
So the best way to apply those, if you do use them, is to do it as a team and benefit not just from the self part, but how do all of us look at it? Because you might see.
So do personality testing on everybody.
Yes.
And then make sure that they're in
if
the.
If you've got a good facilitator for that, you'll also see where we've got no one here with that sort of personality type.
Right.
Good leaders know their strengths and weaknesses and fill those weaknesses with good people. One thing I look for, if everybody is just like the leader, like personality, everything, they're attracting people like themselves, great, but do they have your strengths?
You're going to have some gaps.
You're going to have gaps.
You're going to have gaps. Okay, acquisition landscape. How do you feel like it's changed over the last 5 to 10 years in this mid-market? Have you seen changes there, or
a little? I mean, COVID. I had a client sell in December 31st of 21, one or two. It was like the absolute peak. It's the best time in history. Reminded him of that several times because in COVID everything sat. There was pent up demand, and then people wanted to move. He ended up with 4 companies looking at it, a really good broker, had them compete, and got an unbelievable exit. So timing is one of that. And so COVID had a weird effect on that. And then obviously in the last, year and a half, things have been a little dicier.
Interest rates, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, just a lot of things there. But at the end of the day, if you've got, it's just like anything. No matter what the market's doing, it's like, your sales team telling you that all this is going on. Somebody's winning every day. Somebody is winning every day. I don't care what the environment is, I don't care what the market is. So what can we do to get ourselves there? I think in the marketplace, it's the same thing. If you've got a good company, it could be, let's say you really need to exit. So you're trying to get brokers and private equity to look at you, any type of buyer. Most people want a strategic buyer because they're usually going to pay a little more. That could be a competitor or somebody trying to grab something up. But regardless of that, there's always somebody in that mix that wants what you have.
Right.
It's my opinion. So you got to do enough to find that, but it's not you just need one buyer. You'd love to have a few taking a look and figure out what the best fit is, not only for now, but for the future. Because when you're exiting, you're leaving a few people behind. And you don't want them just thrown to the wolves and everybody's gone in 24 months.
And the more people interested in you, the more negotiating power you have.
No question.
Right? And you can say, well, this person's offering this, what you need to take care of this person, or this is what I'm looking for.
Correct.
So going back to your sale, when you sold your medical device company, if you could do it over again, what would you change?
might have moved a little bit slower and waited to see how a few of the others turned out.
That's hard. That's hard.
That's hard to do.
Bird in the hand.
I had a bird in the hand. I mean, that situation was a little bit unique because it was triggered by an activity. Decisions had to be made. And timing was good for me personally. I was not thrilled the last few years. And interestingly enough, it had nothing to do with the market or the competition. It had everything to do with the leadership I was dealing with.
I see.
So I was pretty motivated to move on. But I don't think a lot. I learned a little bit about negotiating there. The other one we fought is they kind of had a formula for a built-in loss assessment of the inventory. And I'm talking $250 million worth of implant inventory and probably another 150 of instrument inventory at their list price value. So their cost wasn't that high, but that's how we kept them on the books. So there's a huge risk factor. Thousands of parts we're responsible for. Half of them are sitting in hospitals, half of them are in a truck, half of them are in an office.
Some are going to become obsolete tomorrow because of the merger.
We were absolutely best in class in that.
Yeah.
And we weren't willing to accept that. So every audit you've done, where'd we fall in that? It's like I'm not just eating 25 grand because I just want to apply that.
Right, your formula. So don't just go with their formula.
I would have fought for damn near zero. We didn't quite sell there, but I was willing to fight it because we had the history to prove it.
Well, and I think that's important too in my business. You don't just, if the buyer has their own formula, you don't have to believe their formula. You need somebody on your side going, wait, this formula actually makes sense, because math isn't always math in these scenarios.
No question. Yeah. No question. Yeah, the other thing that didn't apply to me, but I've worked with clients that do, is the upfront payment is really the focus. Like there's always, if it's private equity, there's always going to be, you're going to retain X amount of ownership. We're going to hope to sell this in 3 to 5 years. You could get 3 paydays, right? And they make those look as good as possible.
Oh yeah.
Who the hell knows?
Exactly.
I mean, the upfront number is the one to target on. It's the one to focus on. It's the one to fight over, because the rest of it could be good. You have no control.
Zero control.
Zero.
Yeah, and that is prevalent in my business for sure.
Yeah.
And the overpromise, underdeliver,
or
the look over here, is very, very real. Okay. Before we wrap up, we always end Match Play with a golf connection. Now, Tim and I have played golf. Tim doesn't play a lot of golf. He works a lot hard. He worked a lot harder on his business than his golf game in his prime. Yeah. I could tell. But do you have a golf thought? Like when you go out and play, is there something that you work on that maybe somebody gave you a tip for?
I will, I only have one that I think about now, which is somebody noticed that I tend to sway instead of turn. And it's real obvious when I do. So that's my swing tip. Probably the last.
That's my personal problem. That's like the last 3. That's been mine. I don't know how that applies to business. That what I would say that would apply to business, it's also the same, and it would apply to our golf game, you and me, is strategy. I don't think people spend enough time on strategy today. It's the most dangerous thing in today's business versus 10 or 20 years ago. From the time I graduated college till 2000. The Fortune 500 never changed. I mean, GE, the same companies were just trading places in the top 20. Sure.
And from 2000 to today, look at that. Look at Blockbuster goes up, goes away.
Kodak.
Netflix, pick them all. But it's not all about big business. Small business is what drives our whole economy. Mid-market is probably the biggest one that employs the most. But people don't realize how quickly a mom and pop business could last longer 25 years ago than they can today. And we're in an exponential information age. We're in an exponential technology phase right now. So you've got to really take a look at your strategy because, and getting back to our golf game, if you and I are staring at the same hole, I'm thinking totally different than you are based on how I'm going to get to that hole. But that's important. I mean, if we had the exact same strategy, it would be worse.
Yes.
Right. So,
well, I think that's critical, and always learning. I mean, you always have to be learning. I mean, think of AI today, and just in remote work, even that, I had to learn to adjust to that for my team. I thought for sure that would be like,
if somebody calls me and wants to talk, they're interested in what I do, and what's the most recent business book you read that you thought about or think about? And if they don't have an answer to that question, like really,
yeah,
I mean, nothing. No one even told you about, I mean, like there's a really weird one. Humanocracy came out 2 or 3 years ago, and it's all about some of these companies that are trying to just flatten the whole management thing and just have thousands of little teams of 6 or 7. It's theoretical more than it's in practice, but it's like a whole different way of looking at running big business. Doesn't affect me so much, but that was a fascinating book.
It is fascinating.
Because it's just, but people are always looking at what can we do
How can we do it better?
And obviously everybody right now is trying to figure out how to utilize AI. And I'm sure you've been reading about all the overinvestment and a lot of other things. But nevertheless, it's clearly providing huge opportunities. If you don't know anything about it, you're just sitting there going, we don't need to worry about that. We're busy enough. It could just blow right by us. Somebody's going to do something.
Somebody's always winning.
Yeah, Somebody's always winning.
Great quote. Well, Tim, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. It was wonderful. And thanks to everybody for tuning in to Match Play. We'll see you next round.